Greetings and welcome to Sports101, the sports show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. Here at Sports101, we like to expand our conversation of the game to include history, past, and in the making, as well as look at sport from the topics of people, places, and cultural perspectives. I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at Coach_Harp412. While you're on social media, make sure you get social with all our other shows on SportsZone Chicago. You can follow SportsZone Chicago and its variety of shows on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Remember, SportsZone Chicago is a sports talk app. You can watch and listen to my show, Sports101, Sean and Maya in the Morning, the Troubadours, Ivan Vargas, and his Basement podcast, What's Up Cuz, a lot of shows, and you can follow them on YouTube if you miss anything. But more importantly, we want everyone to subscribe to our Sports Zone Chicago app. The Sports Zone Chicago app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Before we start this week's episode, I'd like to talk about National Signing Day today. I want to give a congratulations to all the young men who are fulfilling their dreams of getting a chance to play college football and all the coaching staffs striving to win championships. Myself, special shout out to Coach Sean Gilbert, Mark Williams, Jermaine Smith, and the rest of the Livingstone College football staff. We did something amazing today, and we hope to carry that efforts on to the fall so we can be perennial powers like Damon Wilson and Anton Sewell of Bowie State and other powers within our conference as well as Division II. So again, congratulations to everyone. Speaking of signing day and athletics, we're going to talk about this week diversity athletics, and we're going to highlight the University of Tennessee and some racial discrimination issues they've been having for a while. If anyone knows anything about Tennessee, it's known as the volunteer state, and what they volunteered for was the Civil War. So the song they sing, Rocky Top, I wish I had my own little Rocky Top out in the Tennessee hills. There's no other place like Rocky Top. There's no telephone bills. You know, Rocky Top, the place I love, no place I'd rather be. So thinking of these connotations of being in the woods in Tennessee, not having electricity, loving it, it's kind of alluding to a certain group of people, and we know the type of sentiment they have. These groups are being represented in Proud Boys and other things like that, but that just gives you a kind of backdrop on the mascot and moniker that the athletic teams follow. So now, again, we're going to talk about the University of Tennessee and its athletics programs and some racial issues they've been having for a while. So recently, this week, former NFL great and Vol star defensive lineman Albert Haynesworth, he called for Black football and University alumni of Tennessee to boycott the football program, and he cited systematic racism within the program. Here's a picture of Albert right here. He was a standout at Tennessee and for the Tennessee Titans as well, and he had a long career. However, he is looked at and viewed as kind of negative due to some things he did on the field with his temper. There was one incident with Andre Gerard, a center for the Dallas Cowboys. He stepped on his face when his helmet wasn't on. So he had a moniker for having a nasty sentiment. However, he's shown a different side and not only sensitivity to what's going on in the world, but some political prowess with his statements. So Haynesworth and other Black alumni were upset over the recent hiring of Josh Heupel as a 27th head coach at University of Tennessee. He was hired Wednesday, a few days ago. There's a picture of Josh Heupel right here. Josh Heupel was a former Oklahoma quarterback who went through the ranks and most recently was the head coach at the University of Central Florida. The University of Central Florida is an outlier team, which means they're non-power five. So they, obviously put the billboard up last year. They were national champions because they went undefeated, but yet, they weren't. So he did great things there, but they were still kind of on the outskirts of, I guess, the Power Five conferences, and he was named the head coach. Um, Hainsworth was also upset because what happened is on the coaching staff at the University of Tennessee was a coach that not only played in the NFL, had a better career professionally than Josh Heupel. He's had an extensive coaching career as well. So why do I bring up the NFL? Oftentimes people make uh, stepping stone requirements to be coaches, and you have to have this much experience. So this individual I'm talking about won a national championship for his college, went to the NFL, played, coached in the National Football League as well as BCS football, and that person is T. Martin right there. So T. Martin is the current wide receiver coach at Tennessee, and I believe he was just moved up to associate head coach or something like that. But what Albert is citing is, why wasn't he chosen for the job? Again, Martin is the current Vols receiver coach. He's a former star quarterback. He led the Vols to the national championship in 1999. 1999 was the first year of the BCS, so Tennessee won the first BCS championship. A quick point I'd like to make is, most people, when you think of Tennessee and say quarterback, they say Peyton Manning. However, Peyton Manning failed to do what Tennessee did. Failed to do what T. Martin did and go through the SEC and win a national championship. So actually, T. Martin's college career, where his winning a national championship, kind of surpasses Peyton Manning. Again, I'm only speaking in college career because obviously we know what Peyton Manning did in the pros. With all these accolades and years of college and BCS experience, many alumni wonder, why wasn't T. Martin even interviewed for the job? Hainsworth, again, went on a rant showing his political savvy on Twitter, saying, why would you hire T. Martin and shit on him? Meaning, when he first got hired, he came back from the NFL. And this year with COVID, a lot of the athletic departments, they asked staff to openly take lower salaries. Only T. Martin and one other coach at the University of Tennessee did. All other staff members declined it. So not only by going back to Tennessee, taking a pay cut, he was doing a lot to show love for his alma mater and basically, show deference. But as Albert Hainsworth eloquently stated, or not so eloquently stated, he felt like they were, basically shitting on him by not allowing him to progress, even though he has far more experience than all the other candidates that they interviewed. The current AD who they just hired was a former Central Florida AD, so you can see the ties and why he brought in, and that's a picture of T. Martin right there, and why he brought in Josh Heupel. But guess who the former AD was before Danny White was? And you can see the picture right there was Phil Fulmer. And Fulmer, was T. Martin's college coach. So we have a situation where a player won a national championship for a coach in college, went to the NFL, had a decent career as a backup, went back and coached in the NFL and high-level football, and you're the athletic director, and not only do you refuse to hire him, but he doesn't even get an interview. And when you win a national championship for a school, you bring in millions of dollars, notoriety, enrollment shoots up. There's a lot of benefits from that. And T. Martin still couldn't get an interview. For these reasons, Hainsworth stated that he's not going to attend any games or support financially until there's cultural change in the department. He said Tennessee has a history of this, and they never gave black coaches their due. And he made another historical political reference when he cited Kippy Brown. Kippy Brown, who's pictured right here, is from Tennessee. However, he played quarterback at Memphis State, now the University of Memphis, in the late 70s. He has had NFL coaching and BCS experience. He coached at Tennessee under Johnny Majors. He was an offensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins for 3 years under Jimmy Johnson. And while he was a coordinator at the Dolphins, Lane Kiffin was hired as the head coach at Tennessee. So Lane Kiffin asked him to come back to Tennessee because his experience. He's from Tennessee. He can recruit, especially the Memphis area, which is a hotbed for football. So Lane Kiffin personally asked him to come back to be the co-offensive coordinator and wide receiver coach. As most sports fans know the story, within a few weeks, Lane Kiffin left for a job at USC. And in 1999, Kippy became the interim head coach. Now, during Kippy's coaching tenure, which spanned twice at University of Tennessee and almost 2 decades, he's coached players such as Peyton Manning, Alvin Harper, Carl Pickens, Mark Clayton. He's coached under Tony Dungy, Jimmy Johnson, Johnny Majors, Bruce Coslet. And again, he was at Tennessee twice, and he wasn't qualified to be the head coach. In 2000, Tennessee announced the hiring of Derek Dooley as the head coach, and Kippy Brown resigned and took a job with Pete Carroll in Seattle. So that again shows you his clout in the game, where he can leave due to, again, him being passed over for an interview for the head coach with everything he's done. And he went to the NFL. Now, some people will say, well, they're passing over, black candidates, but the team may be winning. Not so fast, my friends. Since winning the BCS championship in 2008, here are the Tennessee coaches' resumes and their tenures. So in 2009, Lane Kiffin went 7-6. And then obviously Kippy Brown took over, so most of them were under him. 2010 to 2012, Derek Dooley was the coach. He went 15-21, a losing record. In 2012, Jim Chaney got the interim job, and he only went one game before things happened. They removed him. Then they brought Butch Jones in. Butch Jones was slightly over the barometer, but he only went 34-27, which is not what they expected. Is what some people call or elite or pass, elite program, which they were in the early 90s. Brady Hoke went 0-2 in 2017, and Jeremy Pruitt, who came from Alabama, went 16-19 in 2018 through 20. So you can look at all these coaches not having success, and still T. Martin, with all his accolades, cannot get an interview. Last week, with Albert Haynesworth making so much press about it, the University of Tennessee school system president, Randy Boyd, in an interview was asked if it was fair to ask the University of Tennessee to reverse a diversity hire for a major head coaching position or an athletic director. You'd be surprised at his response. Mr. President Boyd stated that it's a definitely very strong consideration and a desire, but at the end of the day, we're going to need to make what we think is the best choice for the future of Tennessee athletics. Now, I want you to reference the coaching records that we just spoke of. So since 2008, only one coach had a winning record, but yet the president of the flagship school, the University of Tennessee school system, is saying they're making these hires for the best choice of the future of Tennessee athletics. So obviously the future is, basement dwellers with all the coaches they're hiring. He also stated that first and foremost, he wanted to make every effort to consider opportunities to improve diversity. But then he kind of went sideways. He said they have diversity and minorities in other positions, just not at University of Tennessee, Knoxville. Now remember, that's the flagship school. That's a school that plays in the SEC. They have other schools like Tennessee Chattanooga, Tennessee Martin, and he stated those as being more diverse, having more diversity on their staffs, having women and other minorities and higher positions in athletics. And they're just kind of waiting to do it at the flagship school. But how long are you going to wait? It's 2020. So exactly what is he saying? All he's saying is we can be diverse at the small schools, or the FCS schools, yet at the flagship school where 70% or almost 80% of my athletes are of African descent and bring in millions of dollars, we can't get a coach to look like them in major sports. The reason I say major sports, this is not just a problem with football. In June, former Lady Vol great Kara Lawson, she called out the university to examine the lack of diversity in athletics department leadership. Now, this is Kara right here. She went on to the great career in the WNBA. Now she's the current head coach at Duke University. Obviously, we know that in women's sports, they're a lot more open to diversity, especially with women of so-called minority background. And Kara Lawson was able to get a job in women's sports. So shout out to Kara for not only having a great career, but transitioning into management. Kara Lawson, she was an All-American for Pat Summitt. And just like the football team, Pat Summitt coached dozens of Black women who put the program on a national stage, but not one of them have been interviewed for the head coaching position for the Lady Vols either. Peerless Price, he was the leading receiver on the national championship team and actually caught the game-winning touchdown. He had a post on Twitter saying that he had a phone conversation with T. Martin, and he was just very distraught. Price wrote in his tweet that, "My brother, if my vision was ever clouded, I have clear sight on everything you sacrificed for our university. Damn the pain in my brother's voice. I've never heard this before." So, he's basically referencing a conversation they had where T. Martin displayed his feelings and, just resentment of, I did everything for this school and they won't even give me an interview. Now, in Tennessee history, there's only been 3 Black head coaches across all sports. So you had Wade Houston. He was there from 1989 to 1994, and Quanzo Martin from 2011 to 2014. Both of them were in men's basketball. You had J.J. Clark from 2001 to 2014, who was the coach of the women's track and field, and also from 2001 to 2011, he directed both programs, and then they combined. We also must note that before Danny White's hire as the athletic director, Tennessee listed 15 people as senior staff members. All of them were white men, and 4 were white women. I want to touch on some things in regards to minority hiring practices, and then we'll take a short break. This all stems around the systematic thing that's going on right now in regards to minority hiring, especially in the so-called money sports. Athletes have saw the lucrative deals that coaches make and have the knowledge to do this. At one point in time, these athletes weren't allowed to coach college or professionally. Now that they have that experience, they're looking to gain leadership roles as coordinators and head coaches, but run into a proverbial glass ceiling time and time again. And the only reason that they hit that is due to the color of their skin. So when we come back from break, we're not only going to discuss minority hiring practices, but a viable solution and how we can get these men coaching jobs, as well as influence the students that they will be teaching, as well as coaching on the field, to make better decisions and hopefully enhance themselves the same way these coaches want to enhance themselves through leadership. So we're going to take a quick break, and we come back, we're going to talk about minority hiring practices in the NFL and give a solution to what these men are coming into time and time again, which is a proverbial glass ceiling and getting leadership positions in high money sports on a national scene. So thank you, and we'll see you right after the break.
You see me.
You hear me.
Respect me.
Respect. Due regard for the feelings, wishes, rights, or traditions of others.
We don't have to agree, but I deserve to be heard. I stand my ground. Respect me.
We don't have to be friends, but I deserve your civility. I stand my ground. Respect me.
You don't have to understand my culture, but I deserve to be authentically myself. I stand my ground. Respect me.
I stand in defiance of your need to make me less in order for you to feel adequate.
I stand.
I stand aware that the America that you see and love today is a result of my free labor.
I stand.
I stand knowing that the contempt you have for me was not instigated by me, but perpetuated by the fear you have of me.
I stand.
I stand surviving your many attempts to emasculate me. Indeed, I thrive despite it.
I stand realizing that you take many things from me, but I will not allow you to take my respect.
I am a man.
I am a proud man.
I am a proud black man.
I am authentically, undisputedly, unapologetically a proud black man.
I am authentic, undisputedly, unapologetically a proud black man.
I am authentically, undisputably, unapologetically a proud black man.
Respect me.
I have done more than enough to deserve it, and still you withhold it.
The bill is past due.
You owe me.
Respect me.
Respect me.
Respect me.
Hello, this is State Representative Juanita Brent of Ohio House District 12. Here with an important announcement. February is Black History Month. Black History Month recognizes the contributions that African Americans have made throughout U.S. history. As we recognize the achievements of African Americans this month, we must also take time to appreciate and celebrate that Black History Month is American history. Did you know that the first Black History Month was celebrated 51 years ago in 1970? The 2021 Black History Month theme is the Black family, representation, identity, and diversity. It's important that we bring awareness to and celebrate the complex, rich, and diverse history of the Black family in the United States. To celebrate and learn more about Black History Month, you can visit AfricanAmericanHistoryMonth.gov. Thank you.
Welcome back. I'm Jamar Harp, and again, this is Sports 101, the sports show that discusses sport beyond the X's and O's. We like to talk about sport from the game from a people, places, and cultural perspective, using the lens of history in the past, present, and in things in the making. Again, make sure you get social with Sports 101 and SportsZone Chicago's variety of shows on Twitter at SportsZone CHI, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram SportsZone Chicago. Remember, subscribe to the YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but most importantly, download the SportsZone Chicago app. The app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Now, before we talk about minority hiring practices in collegiate sports, I would like to touch more on the Lady Vols. If anyone knows anything about women's collegiate basketball or pro basketball, it spurs from a movement in the late 80s and 90s when the women's game took off due to Louisiana Tech, Lady Techsters, and Old Dominion and more importantly, the University of Tennessee Lady Vols. Now, these teams were led by Hall of Famers year after year, from Nikki McCray to Shamika Holdsclaw to Tamika Catchings to Candace Parker. All of these women had stellar WNBA careers, and mostly all of them are into coaching now if they're not still playing. And again, all these people that not only brought fame and notoriety to the University of Tennessee women's collegiate basketball, but showed this country that people support women's sports enough to start a WNBA. They can get jobs in a WNBA, but not at their own alma mater. So that's something that makes you go, if you want to think about going to Tennessee as a minority student athlete or a minority student at all. In regards to minority hiring practices, we know this has been a systematic issue, not just in collegiate athletics, but in our society as a whole. So there's always been people doing surveys on this. In regards to diversity, Richard Lapchek at the DeVoe School in Central Florida has been a pioneer for this. And he actually has a racial and social think tank and leadership group there that produced results not only for the NFL, but for collegiate athletics. So in 2019, they did their yearly study on Division I FBS leadership and in regards to racial and gender report. And again, this is a report they've been doing every year for the past 15 years. And in 2019, the report began with white men still dominate the positions of leadership in college sport. So this institute, which will use the moniker of TIDES, the Institute of Development and Equity in Sport, again, is located at the University of Central Florida. And it's giving college athletics grades year after year. So in 2019, college athletics got an overall grade of D for race and gender, breaking that down into a F for gender hiring in regards to women, and a C for racial hiring in regards to minorities. And when they say minorities, the main minority we're talking about is people of African descent. And that's because we make up such greater population of the playing of the people that play and the coaches that kind of coach those players at the positions. But again, there's a glass ceiling in regards to leadership, i.e. coordinator and head coach opportunities. The Racial Institute went on to say that the dominance of white men at the top has increased from year to year, and the representation of people of color holding a chancellor or president position decreased from last year's report. It also decreased for head coaching jobs. Henceforth, you see the numbers declining. There's also a slight decrease in women's sports. We see this because a lot of women's sports are hiring men as basketball coaches, and that's sort of the cash cow for women's sports. Most women's sports are considered non-revenue. However, some schools or a good portion of schools are able to charge admissions and sell things at their women's basketball events, which makes them a monetary sport. The report also examined, now outside the chancellors and presidents, they looked at athletic directors, faculty athletic representatives, and if you don't know, the faculty athletic representative, or the FAR, is a person from the faculty that works with the athletic department in regards to scheduling, retention of students, understanding some specific needs they may have in regards to travel, scheduling tutors, and just making sure that there's compliance held on both ends, and you don't find cheating scandals which were prevalent in the 80s within college football. They also had conference commissioners across 130 institutions that participate in the Football Bowl subdivision, or the FBS. Overall, individuals of European descent held 337 of the 400 campus leadership positions reported in the study. So obviously, you can see right there by those numbers, things are changing and they're actually getting worse. The numbers contrast with the athletes on the field, as 60% of the football players are of African descent. The study also went on to talk about the challenges of leadership at colleges and at universities that mirror the heterogeneous makeup of their student athletes and student body. That's what Richard Lapchick said. He stated that these people in these leadership positions hold a responsibility to adequately represent those who they lead. These people that are in these positions are saying they're doing that by bringing people that make up the majority of the student body versus people that make up majority of the athletic positions. The counter that what the coaches and the players are saying of African American descent is that these athletic positions afford the school to buy $1 million buildings to improve, to buy golf courses, build hotels, and not only pay for football, but pretty much all the other sports in the athletic department. I was speaking with my super producer Maya earlier today, and we were talking about how Dartmouth University, at the beginning of COVID, they stated that they were going to cut like the non-revenue sports. So they kept, basketball, football, etc., but men's and women's rowing, things like that, lacrosse, women's field hockey, they were cutting things like that. So what the Dartmouth student athletes did was they sued. And due to Title IX, which is for equal representation, the school realized that they'd be better off just keeping these sports versus fighting a battle, because by eliminating the women's sports, they would be further down the spectrum of inequality, because Title IX states you have to have the same number of scholarships for men as well as women. So the student athletes, knowing the rules that the NCAA created, sued the NCAA, effectively scared their school into reinstating the sports. So when you unpack that situation, you see an Ivy League institution suing their school and the NCAA, and actually winning, with the institution ceding and instituting their sports back, any benefits they got monetarily, travel, etc., and rehiring the coaches. So it goes to show, would this have worked at another school? We know when money comes into play, it does. Hence the Big Ten. If you look at when COVID started, the Big Ten decided they were not going to play. However, players and their families from Ohio State and several other prominent schools in the Big Ten started with a Twitter chain, and then moved into more prevalent issues in regards to protesting this. The Big Ten then saw that the other BCS or Power 5 conferences were playing, and they didn't want to take a seat. So they changed their stance and began to play football, when ultimately they decided they weren't going to do it. But the two things that fueled both of these decisions were money. The money that Dartmouth didn't want to lose from lawsuits, mainly from the women athletes, using Title IX, a rule that the NCAA created against them. Ohio State didn't want to be second class to the other Power 5 institutions that were playing by not playing this year. So they decided to play late, and that's where you get the scenario where it was Ohio State worthy to be in the playoffs because they played so little games, and that's where all that comes from. So again, that shows you what really drives this. So when we talk about our solution, we have to realize that money drives all this. And just like the Montgomery bus boycotts, when people stopped riding the buses and the bus companies weren't making any money and they couldn't have passengers to ride the buses, so they couldn't make money to pay the drivers and the maintenance men, they almost folded. So they said, you can ride wherever you want. It wasn't praying that made that change. It wasn't marching that made that change. It wasn't singing. It was withholding your money. And we have to think of that in all things that we do when a proverbial glass ceiling is placed upon us. As these schools change due to the money they may lose or money and notoriety, we must use that against them, as the Dartmouth student athletes use Title IX against Dartmouth and the NCAA. The challenge of leadership, Lapchick said, at colleges and universities, again, mirrors what goes on in the world, But unfortunately for college sports, specifically the FBS institutions, the overrepresentation of white men has contributed to the lack of opportunities for women and people of color. So when you look at previous shows, when we talked about before integration, and 2 weeks ago, I believe, historically black colleges had more people in the NFL Hall of Fame. We're getting people drafted in the top 10. So if you know that you did that before and you're not getting these opportunities now, and money is what these people are motivated by, you can find some solutions from that and move forward. The study also found several steps in the right direction. Keith Gill recently became the first African American commissioner of the FBS conference when he became commissioner of the Sun Belt Conference in March. Now, remember, the Sun Belt Conference is not Power Five, so they would be considered, like Central Florida, conferences like that. They're still FBS, but not Power Five, so most likely they won't get into the playoff. And then that number also grew when Kevin Warren was named the future Big Ten Conference Commissioner in June. Now, this is monumental for the Big Ten because when we talk about the Big Ten has an up and down history when you look at racial equity in sports. The Big Ten was one of the first conferences to allow black players to play. So you found a lot of players from Texas, in the Northeast, in the Midwest going to the Big Ten because they felt more comfortable versus the schools on the East Coast or in the South, which was the Southern Conference, now the SEC, who, were very staunch racists. So you see the Big Ten flourishing for a while after integration. Then you see a period of stagnant play where they're kind of somewhat good, but they never can beat teams outside the Big Ten. You start to hear the buzzwords of slow, non-athletic, more diversity on defense, and they need more black players, and things like that. So you can see the Big Ten go from one spectrum of being the first to admit black players, and then when you get later on into black players being ostracized and different things. And again, oftentimes this is due to geography. Besides Ohio State, most Big Ten schools are not located in large media markets. So oftentimes you're in a place that is not maybe receptive to diversity due to the way these people have been living for so long in the breadbasket of America or the Midwest. So knowing all this, we can formulate our solution. The NCAA also adopted the pledge and commitment to promoting diversity and gender equity in intercollegiate athletics in 2016. So in 2016, they had 871 schools, not all the schools, and 102 conferences signed the pledge. Now, remember, we just stated that there's 130 institutions that participate in the FBS Football Bowl subdivision. And right here, you had not all those schools because it's only 102 conferences. So there's some missing. So in regards to solutions, what can we do to solve this? I want to invoke references from a past show and talk about Deion Sanders and Jackson State. Deion's moniker is that why not Jackson State? Why not now? Deion references the history of Jackson State. Deion also references the lack of representation and management and leadership roles within sport, and the need for black athletes to play at black schools. So his whole task right now is, why can't Jackson State be in a BCS championship game? If all the other schools are playing have the best black athletes, why can't a black school have the best black athletes? Italian restaurants serve the best Italian food, and etc. So this is Deion's mindset. So if these coaches kind of adopted this moniker and took their intellectual capital, meaning all their years of knowledge and experience from major college football and the NFL, and took positions in black college football and it was more Deion Sanders, then you will see that paradigm shift even more back to post integration when it was segregated. And Bear Bryant, who was known as one of the best coaches in college football, but was scared to play Grambling and openly stated, I won't get a black player till I lose the one. And when Randall Cunningham's older brother, Sam Cunningham, and the USC Trojans traveled across the country and played Alabama and beat the brakes off of them, Bear Bryant started to get black players. So knowing all this and knowing the proverbial glass ceilings, if more people like Deion Sanders, Tyrone Wheatley, Sean Gilbert, and other pro athletes and athletes that play major college ball start turning to the HBCU ranks to quote and unquote level the playing field, then that could be a solution. Remember, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing, expecting different results. So if we look at all these studies, they've been going on for 20 years after segregation, after Jim Crow, and they still say the same things. So we must be insane to do the same things. Remember, before integration, historically black college football was better than the predominantly white institutions. Referencing the 1978 Florida A&M football team. Remember, in 1978, Miami University hired the famous Howard Schnellenberger from the University of Oklahoma to start a defunct program in a retirement community outside of Miami in Coral Gables, Florida. His first year, since they were not very good, he had to take a BCS team to an FCS team and play at their home. Now, that's unheard of today, but in 1978, remember, this is still a little after integration. So this is like the going to the downturn when historically black colleges, were the best in football. So in 1978, the University of Miami travels to Tallahassee, Florida, which is in the Western Panhandle. It's not a good trip. If you ever know people from Florida, it's always a South Florida thing, and there's a cutoff, and they can sometimes you talk to people, they say people from Tallahassee in that area are from Alabama. Well, the University of Miami made the trip to Tallahassee, and FAMU beat them and beat them bad. So the next year, Howard Schnellenberger comes out with the state of Miami, where he's going to lock down the whole state and get the best players in the state. So we know the best players in 1978 were at the University of Miami. You had some at the University of Florida and a few at Florida State, but the majority were at Florida A&M and Bethune-Cookman College, now Bethune-Cookman University. So what Howard Schnellenberger did is he took the talent from the historically black colleges, and most of the talent from FAMU was from South Florida, and had them go to Florida and got the kids to buy into that, and now you got the U. So that was approximately about 40 years ago. So now 40 years later, we're in a situation where we're faced with the same thing, a proverbial glass ceiling. Our best and brightest cannot get jobs. It's hard to get jobs. So if we took the approach of Howard Schnellenberger and did the opposite, would the results be the same? I think so. Oftentimes, NFL coaches hope that they'll level the playing field so more athletes return home and make these schools great. And that's starting to happen. You're starting to see athletes in football and other sports promote black colleges and students to go there. A lot of NBA stars, DeMarcus Cousins, Chris Paul, will start to speak out when Maku McCord took the opportunity to go to Howard. People are considering or pushing Mikey Williams, a top 5 draft pick in the 23 class, and he already has 4 HBCUs in his top 10. If we look at what Deion Sanders, Terry Sims, Tyrone Wheatley, and other BCS coaches are doing right now, or FCS coaches are doing by taking BCS athletes from BCS schools and having them go to FCS schools, again, this is the same thing that Howard Schnellenberger did in 1979. And he got a documentary and made a school prominent that was, again, in a retirement community. So that is the solution, ladies and gentlemen. Again, when we have more Deion Sanders, Sean Gilberts, Tyrone Wheatley's, Terry Sims, Damon Wilson's, these big coaches that are getting athletes to come to Black college football and see the importance of it and give them hope and aspiration of moving up the ladder. Oftentimes, if the athletes that play at predominantly white institutions, they end up in Black colleges because they can't get jobs at what they're at. I have a great friend who we were in high school together. We competed against each other, and he went to a college in the city that where we're from. He was the second best quarterback at this school behind Dan Marino. Went to the NFL, got a Super Bowl ring on a practice squad with the Steelers. Start coaching, got hired at his alma mater as a defensive backs coach. Then they sent him to the AFCA convention to find a job, basically stating that they weren't going to hire him on offense. And remember, he's the second best quarterback that ever played at this institution behind Dan Marino, and he's from the city, and he's African American, so he can help with recruiting. But that was said no to that. Why? Because he would be a threat. So knowing this, get your Deion Sanders on and promote and get there. Let's get athletes on board. Chris Paul is doing a great documentary on North Carolina Central University, my alma mater in basketball. Due to the success of Lavelle Moten and what he's done there. He's could have left for many different schools, but he decided to stay there because he knows the benefits. And again, if he leaves and takes a mid-major job or he can't recruit as well, then how's that going to help him in his career? In closing, I would like to thank you for tuning in this week with me and hopefully learning that this, again, is Howard Schnellenberger did, we can do for ourselves. I is we, and we are I. Thank you for tuning in to Sports 101 for me this week. I'm your host, Jamar Harp. Again, make sure to follow me on Twitter at Coach_Harp412, and make sure you get social with Sports 101 and a variety of other shows on the SportsZone Chicago podcast network by following us on Twitter at SportsZone Chicago, Facebook at SportsZone Chicago, and Instagram at SportsZone Chicago. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, search SportsZone Chicago, but most importantly, please download the app. Remember, doing this, you can watch any replays. It's like on demand, and you don't have to pay a monthly service charge. The app can be found in the iTunes, Google Play, and Amazon stores. Thank you for tuning in to this week's episode of Sports 101, and we'll be back with you next week, Wednesday, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 8 p.m. Central Time. Make sure you get some friends and family to watch us live. Remember, support SportsZone Chicago. Ivan Vargas is having a Super Bowl extravaganza show on Sunday. We need everybody turning in this. Remember, SportsZone Chicago is going to be better than First Take, Undisputed, FS1. We are the Sports Zone podcast of the people. Thank you for coming out, and I will see you next week.
Black History Month is huge. It's a way for us to reconnect with our history.
Continue to celebrate and acknowledge the immense amount of contributions that Black people have made.
Black History Month is a celebration of culture.
Another opportunity for everyone to remember that we're all human.
And to have a month that reminds people that Black history is American history.
More than just having names and numbers and dates that are in a book.
To remember how important it is to be Black.
I think that the importance of Black History Month is that if you don't know where you came from, you're not going to be prepared for where you're going.
We all stand on the shoulders of somebody else. If I stand tall, it's because I'm standing on the shoulders of those who came before me.
Black history.
More than a month.
Compassion, noun. Sympathetic pity and concern for the sufferings or misfortunes of others. We're all born with it. It's in us. Don't believe me? When you hear a baby cry, something pulls at you. You want to ease that pain. You want to soothe that hurt. No one had to teach you that. It's called compassion, and it's in you. However, at some point you turned it off when it came to me.
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 The cries of my soul have gone unheard, but today, you will hear me.
My heart has wailed a melody loud enough to shatter your ears and you ignored me. But this week, you will hear me.
This body has beat the drums of anguish, only to be silenced. But this month, you will hear me.
This year,
this decade,
this century,
I will be heard. And
you will be the one to hear me.
And when I am finally heard,
show compassion.
Show compassion.
Show compassion.
Remember, it's in you.